Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm continuing my ongoing analysis into ethics and qualitative methods research. The book that I'm using to guide the research is Ethics and Qualitative Research, so this is the book that I'm using. I'm supplementing the book quite extensively, however, with links to other resources, secondary literature, website information, and such. The notes, as you guys should know by now, and for those of you who are watching me for the first time, just click the link in the description box. It'll take you to the PDF. I've completed the series as far as the notes are concerned, so I won't be adding, at least in this installment, to the series. I might have a second part of ethics and qualitative research, depending on sort of the viewer response that I get. But up until this point in the series, we're about maybe 3 or 4 hours into the series now, which is modest. The idea is we, as qualitative methods researchers, have to recognize the ethical systems in place that are used to govern our conduct with our participants. So we talked about some universal ethical models used to govern our interaction with participants. We talked about a very specific, circumstance-specific mode of conduct. We talked about the difference between virtue and value and that relationship to conduct. We talked even about recognizing the interrelation between participants and ethical modes of conduct that should govern our engagement with participants and between participants. What I want to do in this section, which is going to be section 1.3 on page 7 of the analysis, is I want to take it even more conceptual. Right? The idea is I have to, as an academician, I have to try and present these lectures. It's very difficult to write these notes, but you wouldn't think so, but it's extremely difficult to write these notes such that the notes facilitate a more conversational sort of YouTube experience. But the point is, in this section of the lecture, what I want to do is look at a more conceptual understanding of the internal mechanisms of these ethical systems. And primarily what we discussed in the last section was the difference between a justice-based ethics and an ethics of care. And I told you about some of the limitations of each and some of the strengths of each and more of the complexities of each. What we're going to do in this section, in 1.3, is to get in even deeper, even more conceptual. So, 4 hours into the lecture, 5 hours into the lecture, I forget how far we're in now, we're several hours into the lecture now. Now it's time to take the discussion to a deeper level, because I think at this point you should have a bit of comfort with my presentation style. You know what to expect, so now I can take it a little bit deeper. Alright, so this is ethics and qualitative research. And this is section 1.3. Okay. Concerning a weakness in justice-based approach. We talked about the justice-based approach before. Justice-based approach is a very formal, regimented system in which the participant might have believed that there was only one proper mode of conduct, and if I transgressed against that standard or that norm, I was punished. Right? So that, of course, the participant isn't thinking this during the interview. The participant is completely unaware of any of these structures governing their conduct, their actions, and such. But you, as a training and soon-to-be trained qualitative methods research, you can pick up on these cues, right? So, for example, you might have someone, and the example that I gave, I don't remember when I gave it, maybe an hour or two ago in the lecture, was something along the lines of, I was told that it was forbidden for me to date within my gender, right? I was told that I was forbidden to date outside of my race. Just as a, super cliche, super general, super user-friendly understanding. There is a familial system that condones, that legitimizes actions of sort of dating within the family. And those individuals that transgress that reap some type of they're outcasts. They become pariah. They become ostracized by the family. When they're telling you this, right? You recognize immediately, okay, it's a justice system. So there's a sense in which the individual must feel a sense of injustice for having to conform to the system, and that will help navigate your Q&A, right? That'll help navigate the way in which you interact with the participant, right? A lot of this takes training, but I've discussed this for several hours in the previous section, so if you need to go back and watch that bit again just to sort of refresh your memory, please do. Alright, so let's talk about the weaknesses of justice-based, right? Alright, so the weaknesses of a justice-based approach. First, participant, and I'll give you an example. Rehabilitated former perpetrator, right? A rehabilitated former perpetrator. The inability or the difficulty of the researcher to be merciful, to be understanding of the participant's narrative without biasing the research, right? The inability for the researcher to be understanding, to be merciful, not to bias the research in retelling the story of a former perpetrator. Researcher has an ethical responsibility to bracket his or her bias before the findings. Now, I'm not sure if it's coming up. Yeah, I think I've done it. Let me just go back and find the section really quick. This is very, very important. Where did I put it? Yeah, on page 5, the beginning of the last section, section 1.2, I talked about some of the general assumptions between victims and perpetrators, right? We assume that perpetrators have these characteristics. We assume that victims have these characteristics. Go back to section 1.2, the beginning, and watch it if you need to refresh. What we recognize is it's a twofold approach, right? When we're talking about a justice-based approach, right? We have the researcher, we have the participant, right? We have the participant's connection to his or her life story. We have the researcher's connection to the participant, right? And this is what's known as a syllogism, right? We have the participant's connection to the life story. We have the researcher's connection to the participant. Therefore, we have indirectly, we have the researcher's approach to the participant's life story, all right? Now, I'll go through that one more time. We have the participant's connection to his or her life story. And there is a sense in which a justice-based approach will frame the manner in which the participant talks about his or her experience. So, for the example of a weakness in a justice-based approach, based on the participant's connection to the participant's life story, I'll give you the example of my former student. I had a student, he decided to do research on former child soldiers. The idea that the child soldier committed acts of violence, barbarism, murder, serial murder in a sense, on multiple victims frames traditionally the participant as the criminal. It doesn't just frame the participant as the bad guy, as being evil, as being malicious, in terms of the researcher's connection to the participant, right? A novice researcher would be like, oh, you know, this is a bad person I'm about to have an interview with. It could, and it probably does, for the participant, him or herself, frame him or herself as the bad guy, right? Because there is a sense in which this sense of justice connects both to the participant and the life story of the participant and the researcher and the researcher's connection to the participant. So the idea is, and I'm going to get a little deeper now, the idea is when we talk about justice, when we talk about the rules of justice and the sense in which either, as I said before, punishment is legitimized or delegitimized based on the participant's connection to knowledge, right? You can't hold someone, I talked about this before, you can't hold someone accountable unless the participant was aware of the proper modes of action. There's a sense in which even if the participant is aware of the proper modes of action, that he or she may feel that he's failed this system. I failed this system. I failed human personal morality. Why? Because I was a perpetrator in some atrocity. And I know that it's wrong, and I'm shamed because it's wrong, and so on. As a qualitative methods researcher and not a psychologist or psychiatrist, it's not appropriate to talk in my